Dana here with a video that features a space galaxy background. I made this card earlier this month, and I'm going to show you kind of how I do it anyways. First, I use some cardstock. You can also use watercolor paper. The cardstock I use is 110 pounds, so it's a little thicker and can better handle the water and the paint and kind of what I'm going to be doing to it. So I'm going to be using Distress Paint, and I chose to do 3 different colors plus a black, and I just pressed the paint into my craft mat in roughly the size of a card base, so about 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. It doesn't have to be perfect, just roughly that shape. And for this particular card, I'm just going to be using 3 colors plus black. You can use 1 color or 2 colors. It doesn't really matter. I just decided to use these particular colors because I plan on coloring my spaceship this kind of blues and purples. So, and of course, you want to start with your lighter color first and kind of work your way up to the black. Of course, you can use as much black or little black as you want, and you just kind of press it all over and get the coverage that you're happy with. Alright, and then I add water. This is actually pearlized water. I don't really shake it up too much because then it will be really pearlized. But and I just spritz it over the paint. In this particular card, it looks like I didn't use quite as much paint as I did for the card that I just showed you at the beginning. So obviously it's up to you how much water you use. Of course, I think every time you do this, it comes out a little different. But that's just kind of the nature. But I just press my card base into all the paint and water. And of course, when you bring it up, it looks really bad. But I just keep pressing it and kind of filling in the different areas of the card base. I add a little bit of water here and there as needed. Kind of helps to smear the paint and kind of you're almost putting on layers, I guess. And sometimes the white of the card base shows through, and sometimes I cover it all up. I just kind of like press it around until I'm kind of happy with it. And what's nice, it doesn't have to be perfect. There's no really right or wrong way to do this. So when I'm happy with how it looks, I just set it aside to let it dry. Now I don't like to waste what's left, so I give it a little bit more spray, and then I press my extra card base into it and soak up all the rest of the ink and water and stuff. So that way I can use it all. Plus I have kind of this extra background that I think is kind of cool, um, to use for some other card in the future. So I just soak it all up, kind of just pressing it and wherever it hits. And you can see you kind of get like totally 2 different looks. But the second one I'll be using, in some future card at some point. Alright, so for another way you can do this, you can use Distress inks. Now I'm going to be cutting up my cardstock a little bit, and I'm going to have one panel see come through. So the idea is to have the spaceship. This is kind of like the fire that comes from the spaceship. So I put down a light yellow first, and then I'm adding a couple darker oranges, but near the top. So it kind of shades it from a dark down to the light. So I'm just kind of adding, it's kind of similar to my paint, just dabbing it onto my craft mat. In roughly the size of a card base. And then I'm going to add my water just like I did with the paint. And then I'm just going to take my card base and just press it into the ink. And I kind of get this, of course, cool orange and yellow look. My darker color is at the top, kind of where I want it. And I just kind of, I look at it for a minute, go, well, do I like it how it looks? And so I just press it back onto the card mat to just pick up a little bit more color in that one corner. And like the other one, I just add a little bit more water and use another panel to kind of soak up the rest of my ink and water, and I'll use this for another card in the future. Kind of gives you this, kind of a cool watercolor kind of like look without, I mean, you're already making a mess, so you might as well soak it all up. And you can see the two different kind of looks that you get. So I always, of course, clean my mat. And then next I'm going to be doing my stamping. I'm using this Blast Off set from the Alleyway Stamps. It's new this month, and I've already cut the matching SVGs, and I like to just keep them within my little stamp pocket there. And so I'm just going to pull it off and stamp it up. Oh, and the stamp was attached to one of the little moons, so I can just clip it real quick and put it back onto the acetate. Really easy. And I'm just going to be using some VersaFine pigment ink to stamp it up, because I'm going to be using distress markers to color my spaceship. And of course I always check to make sure I'm lining up the right side, which it wasn't, so I just flipped it over and then just stamp it. Go. So I'm not gonna go into all the different distress markers that I used. I forgot to write them down, but I used some blues and purples, a couple yellow and oranges for the fire and stuff. So I'm going to speed up the video so you can enjoy the coloring, and I'll be back in a little bit. So I'm done coloring. You can see it's all colored up and cute. So I'm just going to zoom out back to the full view of my mat. So I'm going to just make sure that my mat is clean, because next I'm going to be going back to my first background, the one I used with the paint, and I'm kind of doing the next step on it. I don't wait for it to dry all the way. I'm too lazy to do that. But I'm going to be using this Distress stain. It's the picket fence. It's the only stain I have. I'm sure this would work just as fine with like the Distress paint. I just don't have the white paint. So I'm going to spritz it again with water. And this time I'm just going to kind of dab certain areas like really quickly, moving it around on my background. It's not very opaque. The idea is just to kind of create, kind of give, I don't know, puts a matte finish over it almost. Kind of dulls um, the paint, the color a little bit to kind of make it a little bit more spacey, I guess, is the idea. But I set it, of course, to dry, but I'm too lazy to let it totally dry. So I just continue on to the next step, which is adding splatters of the spray ink. And of course, this is up to you. I just like the added interested ads. I start with the white. It's an opaque white, but it dries not quite vibrant, I guess you could say. Because when I'm done, it actually doesn't, because it looks really white here on the video, but once it dries, it doesn't quite look quite as white. But I still like the look it gives. So I'm also going to be adding black splotches too. And again, just to and make it still look as spacey as possible. And now here, usually I let it dry, but I don't really have the time. So once I get done with all my splashes, and I do this on my extra ones that I did, and the same with my yellow piece. So I go and emboss it, so I take my heat gun to it, I should say. So that way all the little spots are nice and dry and I won't smear anything. So now it's time to actually start making my card. So my idea is to put the the orangey yellow piece behind this space background, and I want it to kind of be in this triangular spot. And I'm casing Francine's card. The link will be in the description, so you can take a look at it and kind of see where I'm getting this idea from. But I basically kind of sketched out a little triangle, kind of saw where I wanted my spaceship to be. And of course, I couldn't find my lines after I had sketched them out. So I just used my ruler to kind of use as a guide, so I knew where to cut, and of course have a straight line. You could of course break out your paper trimmer and stuff, but scissors works just fine for me. So then plus, the ruler keeps it pretty straight. So I make sure that it's where I want it to be, and it looks like it's gonna, work out where I've drawn the lines. And I just use my scissors to cut out that little kind of triangle area that I drew in. And I'm going to keep this little triangle and try to use it somewhere because it's a nice little piece. Maybe I'll die cut something out or something, but so I can set that aside, and then I can get my panel. And of course the orange is darker at the top. Kind of see how I'm thinking. So I'm kind of just moving it around, trying to decide like where I like the background the best. And so I kind of just move it around a little bit and like, yeah, do I like it here or there? Make sure it all lines up right. And so I just make little pencil lines kind of where everything goes. So that way I can come in and add some foam tape and kind of know where I need to not put the foam tape. So I just cut up bits of some foam tape. This is like really teeny tiny circles that I like never use anything that small, so I just end up cutting up the whole sheet um, and using it. So I'm just double checking because I can't quite see the lines that I drew. So, and I definitely don't want to like put down the tape um, where it needs to be. So, and I also decide that there's like too much cardstock and I could trim that off, use it for something else, and not use quite as much foam tape either. So I just make sure I try to find out where my lines are. I had to look at it really close up because I'm like, I can't see them from far away. So I just double check everything, kind of draw a bigger, darker points so I can see where I'm putting the actual tape down. You want to make sure it's right because I don't want to have to go through and um, redo all my ink and water and everything for messing up. So once it's down, I can just trim off this extra at the bottom and the side because the darker space background is of course basically my card base panel. So it's the correct size that will fit onto a card base. So just trim it down, and here I'm just trying to decide how I want to add the spaceship plus a sentiment. I found this little notched banner. I found the die on my desk on one of my trips back to my desk, and I realized that would be a great place to put my sentiment. So I quickly die cutted just that little banner. And I also decided to go ahead and add my spaceship with some foam tape, just kind of add some more dimension. So I just added the foam tape to the back and added the spaceship to the front of my card. So I'm going to be using, of course, the blast off set, and there is the words blast off that I'm going to be using. It fits the little banner that I decided to use. And I just wanted to double check that it fit, so I kind of just quickly placed it over the banner and then lined it up on my mat, so hopefully it will be straight. And I just place a clear block over it. And I always, whenever I piece together sentiments, I always stamp it once on scrapbook or a piece of scrap page, just to make sure it stamps right, it's in line, it's not crooked or off really bad. So that way it saves you from having to die cut your piece again and stamp it again. So I'm just stamping my sentiment on my little banner. And now I'm deciding if I should use more foam tape to add it. And I figure why not? I like to use lots of foam tape, so everything's better with foam tape. Alright, so now I've got sentiment on there, and of course you can see it fits my card base, and it's kind of hard to see, but the dark space background, of course, is, or I should say, I guess the yellow, the orangey background is kind of higher than the darker space background because I used the foam tape. So when I place it onto my card base, I need to place foam tape around kind of the edge, and then just add regular tape that I'm peeling off from the orange panel. So that way I can actually adhere the whole thing to my card base rather than just that orangey piece is the only thing that's actually flush to the card base. So that's why I had to add the tape kind of around the top and the side, or the foam tape, I should say. So I always start at the top when I add my panels to my card base. Make sure everything's straight, press it down really good, kind of see there some of that foam tape. Just want to make sure it sticks really good. And there you got it. There's my space background, kind of two ways that you can do it. And I hope you give it a try. And here, of course, here's the first one that I did earlier in the month. And you can see totally different, but that's okay. Thanks for joining me.